The Grand Palacio Theater buzzed with activity as afternoon rehearsals reached their third hour. Dust particles danced in the beams of stage lights, and the red velvet seats, empty now but soon to be filled with eager audiences, stretched back into the darkness. In the front row, Sofia Novak tapped her pen against her notebook with growing frustration. "Stop, stop, stop!" Sofia raised her hand and the music screeched to a halt. The cast members froze mid-motion, exchanging worried glances. They knew that tone. "Thomas, what exactly are you doing to that piano?" "That's Mozart, not background music for a shopping mall." Thomas, a young man with round glasses and trembling hands, looked up from the grand piano. "I'm sorry, Ms. Novak, I thought—" "That's the problem," Sofia cut in, standing up and walking to the edge of the stage. At 42, she commanded respect in the theater world. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, and her reputation for perfectionism had earned her both awards and a nickname among her crew, the Hurricane. "You're thinking too much. Mozart isn't mathematics. It's emotion. It's life." The cast members took small steps backward, creating an invisible circle of safety around the piano. This was the third pianist Sofia had worked with for their upcoming production of The Nightingale's Song, and everyone knew her patience was wearing thin. Sofia climbed the steps to the stage, her practical black boots making hollow sounds against the wooden floor. She wasn't tall, but her presence filled the room as she approached the piano. "May I?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. Thomas nodded and slid off the bench, relief washing over his face as Sofia took his place. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then her fingers touched the keys. The theater filled with sound, not just notes, but something alive. The melody of Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16 flowed through the space, telling a story of joy and longing and hope. The cast members' faces softened. A stagehand peeking from behind the curtain stopped to listen. Even the janitor, who had quietly entered through the back door to begin his evening shift, paused with his mop in hand. When Sofia finished, the silence felt heavy with meaning. She opened her eyes and turned to Thomas. "That's what I need. That's what this production needs." Her voice was softer now, but no less firm. "This piece sets the emotional foundation for Act 2. If you can't feel it, neither will our audience." Thomas swallowed hard. "I'm not sure I can play it like that, Ms. Novak." Sofia studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Perhaps not, but someone must." She stood up and addressed the room. "We'll take 15 minutes, then continue with Scene 4. Thomas, practice that piece until your fingers remember what your brain keeps forgetting." As the cast scattered for their break, most heading to the small cafe next door for much-needed coffee, Sofia returned to her seat in the front row. She rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. Opening night was 3 weeks away and nothing felt ready. Lisa, her assistant director, slid into the seat beside her. "That was beautiful playing." "It was adequate," Sofia replied, though a small smile touched her lips. "My mother would have played it better." "Your mother was a concert pianist." "It's hardly fair to compare." "Life isn't fair," Sofia said, reaching for her water bottle. "Art isn't fair. That's what makes both so interesting." Lisa hesitated before asking, "Are you going to fire Thomas?" Sofia took a long drink before answering. "I don't know. Finding another pianist this close to opening night would be a nightmare. We could use a recording as backup." "Absolutely not." Sofia's voice rose sharply, causing a few lingering cast members to glance their way. She lowered her voice. "Live theater needs live music. The audience deserves that authenticity, that risk. A recording is too safe." Lisa nodded, knowing better than to argue. Sofia's dedication to theatrical purity was legendary and non-negotiable. From the back of the theater, the janitor quietly began his work, moving between rows with practiced efficiency. His name was Andrei Petrov, though most of the theater staff just called him the cleaning guy when they noticed him at all. He had worked at the Palacio for nearly 3 years, always the evening shift, always alone. He liked it that way, the solitude, the rhythm of his tasks, and most of all, the music that lingered in the air even after rehearsals ended. Today, however, Andrei moved more slowly than usual, his ears still ringing with the sound of Sofia's playing. It had been years since he'd heard Mozart performed with such understanding. It reminded him of, but no, he wouldn't think about that now. The past was the past. On stage, Thomas had returned to the piano, practicing the troublesome Mozart piece. His playing was technically correct but lifeless, like someone carefully following a recipe without tasting the food. After several minutes, Sophia stood up again, unable to listen any longer. "Enough," she called out, and Thomas's hands froze above the keys. The cast members who had returned from their break watched nervously as Sophia marched back to the stage. One whispered to another, "Here we go again. Hurricane warning." Sophia stopped beside the piano, her face tight with frustration. "Thomas, I appreciate your effort, but this isn't working." "I'm trying, Ms. Novak, really. I know you are. But we've reached the point where trying isn't enough. We need results." She turned to address everyone. "This production opens in 21 days. Every element must be perfect, the lighting, the movement, the music. Especially the music." Lisa joined her on stage, sensing the tension building. "Perhaps we should move on to scene 4 and return to this tomorrow when everyone's fresh?" Sophia shook her head. "No, this piece is the heart of our show. Without it—" She trailed off, then suddenly laughed, the sound surprising everyone. "You know what? I'm so desperate at this point I'd marry anyone who could play this Mozart piece properly." The cast chuckled nervously, unsure if she was joking. Sophia spread her arms wide in a theatrical gesture. "I'm serious. Play Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16 with true feeling and I'll marry you on the spot." Her voice echoed through the theater, followed by more laughter, this time more genuine as the tension broke. "Is that a formal proposal to all of us?" joked Ben, one of the lead actors. "A proposal of artistic desperation," Sophia replied with a wry smile. "But yes, open to all comers. Any takers?" She looked around the stage dramatically. No one volunteered. Thomas looked at the piano keys as if they might bite him. "No? Well then," Sophia clapped her hands together. "Back to work. Scene 4, everyone. Thomas will figure out the Mozart situation tomorrow." As the rehearsal shifted focus, Andre continued his quiet work in the back of the theater. Unlike the others, he hadn't laughed at Sophia's joke. Instead, a strange expression had crossed his face, something between pain and longing. He had pushed his mop more slowly, making sure to catch every word. When the cast moved to their positions for scene 4, Andre slipped out to empty his bucket. In the small maintenance closet, surrounded by cleaning supplies and the familiar smell of lemon disinfectant, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. His fingers twitched slightly at his sides, moving in patterns that matched Mozart's notes, movements so small no one would notice, yet so precise they could have been playing on an invisible keyboard. It had been 17 years since he had touched a piano. 17 years since he had left behind the concert halls of St. Petersburg, trading a promising career for a new life in a new country. Sometimes weeks passed without him thinking of those days. But now, with Mozart's melody still echoing in his mind and the director's words, "Play Mozart and I'll marry you," ringing in his ears, the memories came flooding back. Andre shook his head as if to clear it. He was being foolish. He was a janitor now, not a pianist. The director's comment wasn't meant for people like him. It was a joke between artists, not an invitation to a 58-year-old immigrant with calloused hands and a mop. He filled his bucket with fresh water and returned to the theater, keeping his eyes down as he worked. But as the rehearsal continued, he found himself stealing glances at the grand piano sitting center stage, gleaming under the lights like a black island of possibility. "It's just a joke," he whispered to himself as he swept beneath the back row seats. Just words. But in his heart, something that had been dormant for a very long time began to stir. A memory, a hunger, a piece of himself he thought he had buried forever. And as the evening wore on and Mozart's notes continued to dance through his mind, Andre wondered what would happen if, just if, he were to accept Sophia's challenge. The click of the lock echoed through the empty theater as the last of the cast filed out. It was nearly 10 o'clock and rehearsal had run late again. Andre waited in the shadows of the lobby until he heard the final car engine fade into the distance. Only then did he emerge, pushing his cleaning cart toward the main stage area. This was his favorite time at the Palacio Theater, the quiet hours when the building belonged only to him. During the day, it was a hive of activity. Actors rushing about, technicians adjusting lights, directors shouting instructions. But at night, the theater revealed its true character. The ornate ceiling with its painted angels, the worn wooden floorboards that creaked with history, the smell of dust and dreams. Andre began his routine as he always did, starting with the back rows and working his way forward. His movements were methodical, practiced over the 3 years he'd worked here. Sweep the floors, wipe down the seats, collect any forgotten programs or coffee cups. The theater manager had once commented that Andre was the most thorough cleaner they'd ever employed. "You clean like each spot matters," she'd said, not realizing how much that simple observation had meant to him. Because details had always mattered to Andre. Long before he became a cleaner, details had been his life. As he worked, his mind kept returning to that afternoon's rehearsal. To Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16 in C major, Sonata Facile. To the way director Novak's fingers had moved across the keys, bringing to life a piece he knew intimately. To her frustrated words and her joking promise, "Play Mozart and I'll marry you." Andre smiled to himself as he emptied a trash bin. What would the fierce director think if she knew that the man who mopped her floors had once played that very piece at the Mariinsky Concert Hall in St. Petersburg? That critics had called his touch transcendent and his interpretation revelatory? That had been another life, another Andre. Before the economic collapse that had wiped out his savings. Before his mother's long illness that had required expensive treatments. Before the painful choice to leave his homeland for a country where his diplomas meant nothing, and his accent marked him as an outsider. Andre's cart squeaked slightly as he pushed it down the center aisle. He made a mental note to oil the wheels tomorrow. He hated unnecessary noise, a habit from his former profession where control over sound was everything. When he reached the front row, Andre paused. His gaze traveled up to the grand piano still sitting center stage. It was a Steinway. He knew that much, though he'd never touched it. The cleaning staff had strict instructions. Dust the piano's exterior, but never open the lid, never touch the keys. For 3 years, he had followed that rule without difficulty. He had built a wall between his past and present so high that even the sight of a piano no longer stirred painful memories. Or so he had believed. But today, something had shifted. Hearing Mozart played badly, then played well, had awakened something inside him. A hunger, a memory of who he had been. Of what his hands could do. Andre glanced at his watch. He had 4 more hours before the night security guard made his rounds. 4 hours alone with a Steinway and memories he'd tried to forget. "Don't be foolish," he muttered to himself in his native language. He turned away from the piano and focused on cleaning the conductor's pit, but his eyes kept drifting back to the stage, to the piano, to possibility. After finishing the seating area, Andre reluctantly moved to the stage. He would dust the piano's exterior as usual, nothing more. As he climbed the side stairs, his heartbeat quickened. Standing on a stage felt both foreign and familiar, like returning to a childhood home now occupied by strangers. The stage lights were off, but the safety lights gave enough illumination to see. Andre ran his dustcloth gently over the piano's glossy surface. This close, he could smell the unique scent of polished wood and metal strings. His fingers trembled slightly. How many pianos had he played in his 47 years before coming to America? Hundreds, perhaps. From his family's old upright with the sticky D key to the magnificent instruments of Europe's finest concert halls. For nearly 3 decades, the piano had been his voice, his confidant, his livelihood. And then silence. 17 years of silence. Andre set down his dustcloth and stepped back, ready to leave. But instead of returning to his cart, he found himself sliding onto the piano bench. He didn't touch the keys, not yet. He simply sat, hands resting on his knees, breathing in the moment. "This is madness," he whispered, but made no move to stand. The Mozart sonata that director Novak had played floated through his memory. Such a deceptive piece. Seemingly simple, technically accessible even to students, but fiendishly difficult to play with true understanding. The facile in its nickname was almost a joke among serious pianists. Andre lifted the cover, protecting the keys. The white and black rectangles gleamed up at him like old friends waiting for his return. For a long moment he only looked. Then slowly he raised his right hand. One note. Just one. What harm could come from that? His index finger pressed a middle C, the sound resonating through the empty theater. The note was pure, clean, alive. Andre closed his eyes as the vibration traveled up his arm and into his chest. Then another note, and another. Before he realized what was happening, his hands were playing the opening measures of Mozart's Sonata No. 16. Hesitant at first, like a man wading into cold water. The muscles in his fingers remembered what his conscious mind had tried to forget. Measure by measure, the music came back to him. His technique was rusty. Notes he would once have played effortlessly now required concentration. His left hand felt particularly stiff, but underneath the imperfections, the music was there. Mozart's genius flowing through hands that had once been worthy of it. Andrei played the first movement all the way through, then stopped abruptly. What was he doing? This wasn't his world anymore. Tomorrow there would be rehearsal again, and he would be back with his mop and bucket, invisible as always. This moment of weakness changed nothing. He closed the piano cover gently and stood up. As he turned to leave, a voice called from the darkness. "That was you playing?" Andrei froze. At the back of the theater, a flashlight beam bobbed toward him. The night security guard Luis had arrived early. "I'm sorry," Andrei said quickly. "I shouldn't have touched the piano. It won't happen again." Luis walked down the center aisle, his flashlight now pointed at the floor. "No need to apologize." "That was beautiful." Andrei relaxed slightly but remained embarrassed at being caught. "I was just playing Mozart," Luis finished for him. "The same piece they were rehearsing today." He reached the front row and looked up at Andrei with newfound curiosity. "You're full of surprises, my friend." The two men had developed a friendly relationship over the years, exchanging greetings and occasional conversation when their shifts overlapped. But they knew little about each other's lives outside the theater. "It was nothing," Andrei said, uncomfortable with the attention. "A small memory from long ago." Luis studied him for a moment. "Didn't sound like nothing to me. Sounded like someone who knows what they're doing." He hesitated, then asked, "Were you a musician? Before?" That simple word contained so much meaning for immigrants like them. Before America. Before starting over, Andrei nodded slightly. "In another life." "And now you clean theaters instead of performing in them," Luis said, understanding in his voice. He had his own before story. Andrei knew he had been an accountant in his home country. "We all do what we must," Andrei replied. Luis turned off his flashlight, the safety lights providing enough illumination for them to see each other. "You know what the director said today? About marrying anyone who could play that Mozart piece?" "It was a joke," Andrei said, picking up his dustcloth. "Maybe," Luis shrugged. "But you just played it better than that young man at rehearsal." Andrei shook his head. "My playing is not what it was. And besides, I am the cleaning man. Director Novak doesn't even know my name." "She knows mine," Luis countered. "She knows everyone who works here. She just doesn't waste words on people she thinks are just passing through her theater." He smiled. "She might be surprised to learn who's really here." Andrei gathered his cleaning supplies, eager to change the subject. "I should finish my work. There's still the lobby and bathrooms to clean." Luis didn't press the issue. "Of course. But listen, Andrei." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If you ever want to play again when no one's around, I won't mention it. Sometimes the soul needs what it needs." Andrei looked at the security guard with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you." As he pushed his cart back down the aisle, Andrei felt strangely lighter than he had in years. The wall between his past and present had cracked just slightly. Through that crack, music had begun to flow again. In the coming nights, with Luis's silent permission, Andrei would return to the piano after hours. First for minutes, then for an hour or more, working through the rust in his fingers, reawakening muscles long dormant, courting Mozart like an old lover he hoped to win back, and always in his mind a voice that sounded suspiciously like Director Novak's. "Play Mozart properly, and I'll marry you." A joke, yes, but also perhaps a challenge. 2 weeks before opening night, the Palacio Theater hummed with a new kind of tension. Everyone could feel the calendar pages turning too quickly, the available rehearsal days dwindling like sand in an hourglass. The pressure showed clearly on Sophia's face as she stalked the aisles, coffee in one hand, production notes in the other. "Again," she called to the stage. "From the beginning of Act 2. Thomas hunched over the piano, his shoulders tight with anxiety. In the 2 weeks since Sophia's half-joking marriage proposal to anyone who could play Mozart properly, things had not improved. If anything, Thomas seemed more nervous, more mechanical in his playing, a pianist trapped in his head rather than performing from his heart. Andrei watched from the back of the theater, where he was touching up some paint on a wall damaged during set movement. He had started arriving early to his shift, finding excuses to be present during the end of rehearsals. No one questioned the cleaner's presence. He had become part of the background like the exit signs and fire extinguishers. But unlike the exit signs, Andre was listening intently, absorbing every criticism Sophia lobbed at Thomas, noting every nuance she demanded in the Mozart piece that continued to elude the young pianist. For the past 2 weeks, Andre's nights had transformed. After Luis's discovery and tacit permission, Andre had established a new routine. Clean the theater efficiently, then spend precious time at the piano. First 1 hour, then 2. His fingers, stiff from years of disuse, gradually remembered their old skills. The calluses from mop handles and cleaning solutions began to share space with the softer calluses of a pianist. No, no, no. Sophia's voice cut through Andre's thoughts. She marched toward the stage, her boots hammering against the wooden floor. Thomas, we've been over this passage a dozen times. The transition needs to flow like water, not lumber like a drunk elephant. Thomas's face reddened. I'm trying, Ms. Novak. Trying isn't enough at this point, she said, echoing words she had spoken 2 weeks earlier. We open in 14 days, 14. Do you understand what that means? Lisa, the assistant director, moved to intercept. Let's take 5 minutes, she suggested, placing a gentle hand on Sophia's arm. Everyone needs to breathe. Sophia shook her head but didn't resist. 5 minutes. Not a second more. As the cast dispersed for their break, Sophia remained by the piano, staring at the keys as if they might offer solutions. Andre, sensing her need for privacy, retreated to the maintenance room. He had his own concerns to contemplate. Last night, something extraordinary had happened. While playing through the Mozart sonata for perhaps the 20th time, Andre had felt a shift. The music had suddenly flowed not just from his fingers but from somewhere deeper. For a brief, transcendent moment, he had played not as a man remembering how to play, but as the pianist he had once been. The moment had brought tears to his eyes. You're getting there, Luis had said afterward from his usual spot in the back row. The security guard had taken to arriving early for his shift, bringing a thermos of coffee to share while he listened to Andre play. It's still not what it was, Andre had replied. Maybe not, but it's something real. Luis had studied him thoughtfully. The question is, what will you do with it? That question followed Andre now as he organized cleaning supplies. What would he do with this reawakened talent? Nothing, most likely. Return to Russia? Impossible. Audition for orchestras or teaching positions? At his age, with his gap in employment? Laughable. No, this private resurrection of his skills was just that, private. A secret pleasure, a balm for an old wound, nothing more. When Andre returned to the theater, rehearsal had resumed. He worked quietly along the walls, half listening as they moved through Act 2. Thomas's playing remained technically adequate but lifeless. Sophia's frustration was palpable. After rehearsal ended, Andre overheard a conversation as he emptied trash bins near the stage. We need to talk about Thomas, Lisa said in a low voice. Sophia sighed deeply. I know. Opening night is 2 weeks away. If we're going to make a change, with who? Sophia interrupted. Every decent pianist in town is already booked. I've called everyone. What about a recording? Just as backup? We've been through this. No recordings. This is live theater. Then what's the solution? Sophia gathered her notes, her movements sharp with anger. I don't know. A miracle, perhaps. They walked away, unaware of the cleaner who had frozen in place, their words echoing in his mind. A miracle. Wasn't that what his rediscovered talent felt like? A small miracle in a life that had seen few of them. That night, after completing his cleaning duties in record time, Andre sat at the piano with new purpose. Luis brought his usual thermos and settled into his front row seat. You seem different tonight, the security guard observed. Andre flexed his fingers. I heard something today. The director is considering replacing Thomas. The pianist? 2 weeks before opening? Luis whistled softly. That's risky. She has no replacement, Andre said. She has called everyone. Everyone she knows, Luis corrected with a meaningful look. Andre ignored the implication. I want to try something tonight. The full sonata, all 3 movements, as if it were a real performance. Luis straightened in his seat. I'm listening. Andre closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then his fingers found the keys, and Mozart's Sonata No. 16 filled the empty theater once more. He played the first movement with a confidence that surprised even himself. The familiar allegro was light but purposeful, each note distinct yet part of the greater melody. His left hand, which had been his weakness during practice, now provided a solid foundation for the right hand's more intricate work. The second movement, André's favorite, was the heart of the piece. The adagio allowed for more expression, more soul. Here, Mozart had written not just notes, but emotion itself. André leaned into the music, his body swaying slightly as his fingers coaxed a singing quality from the piano that had been absent in Thomas's rendition. Then came the final movement, the rondo. Playful yet complex, it demanded both technical precision and artistic freedom. André's tempo was slightly slower than traditional interpretations, but this deliberate choice allowed the intricate passages to speak clearly rather than blur together. When the final chord resolved, the silence that followed seemed to vibrate with possibility. André opened his eyes to find Luis standing, an expression of wonder on his face. "My friend," Luis said quietly, "that was no memory of what you once could do. That was mastery." André felt both drained and invigorated, as if he had completed a long journey only to discover it was just beginning. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but it changes nothing." "It could change everything," Luis countered. "The director needs a pianist." "You are a pianist. I am a cleaner. You are both." Luis came to the stage and leaned against the piano. "André, I've worked here 5 years. I've seen a dozen productions come and go. This one matters to director Novak more than most. It's her first since winning the Regional Theater Award. The critics will be watching. All the more reason she wouldn't consider someone like me," André argued. "Someone like you? You mean someone with classical training who plays Mozart exactly as she wants it played?" Luis shook his head. "Your problem isn't your talent. It's your fear." The words stung because they contained truth. André had feared many things over the years: poverty, failure, the judgment of others. But most of all, he had feared hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break you when it was crushed. "I need to finish cleaning," he said, closing the piano lid. Luis checked his watch. "It's nearly midnight. Go home, get some sleep, but think about what I said." Over the next week, André continued his secret practice while the daytime rehearsals grew increasingly tense. Thomas made small improvements, but not enough to satisfy Sophia. The cast whispered about replacement options. Stage crew took bets on whether Thomas would make it to opening night. And quietly, methodically, André polished his Mozart. Not just the notes, he had those down perfectly now, but the interpretation. What would Sophia want? How would she hear this piece? He studied her reactions during rehearsals, absorbing her comments, her criticisms, her rare moments of approval. One night, 10 days before opening, Luis brought a guest to their secret sessions. "This is my wife, Camilla," he said. "She's a music teacher. I hope you don't mind that I asked her to listen." André hesitated, uncomfortable with expanding their secret circle, but Camilla's warm smile and genuine interest won him over. He played the sonata from beginning to end while she listened attentively. "Beautiful," she said when he finished. "Such sensitivity to Mozart's intentions." She paused, then added gently, "But you're holding something back." André looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "There's a wall between you and the music. Between you and the audience." She gestured to the empty theater. "You play perfectly but safely, as if you're afraid to fully commit." Her words echoed in André's mind long after she and Luis had left. A wall. Yes, he had built many walls over the years. Walls between his past and present. Between his true self and the world. Between his heart and the music he had once loved so completely. Could he tear those walls down? Did he even want to? The answer came to him gradually as opening night grew closer. Yes, he wanted to. But not for Sophia, not for some joking promise of marriage, not even for Mozart. For himself. 5 days before opening night, disaster struck. André noticed it the moment he arrived at the theater. The unusual silence, the small clusters of cast members speaking in hushed voices, the palpable tension. He set down his cleaning supplies and approached Luis, who was helping adjust a light fixture despite being off duty. "What happened?" André asked quietly. Luis glanced around before answering. "Thomas collapsed during afternoon rehearsal. Exhaustion, they think, but he's in the hospital for tests." He lowered his voice further. "Sophia is in her office with Lisa. They've been there for 2 hours." André felt a strange mix of concern for the young pianist and a flutter of something else. Possibility. Opportunity? That made him immediately ashamed. Will he be all right? Physically, yes, from what I heard. But the doctor ordered complete rest for at least a week. Luis gave Andre a meaningful look. Opening night is in 5 days. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Andre busied himself with his cart, trying to quiet the sudden pounding of his heart. This wasn't how he had imagined things might unfold. Not with a young man in the hospital. Not with a production in crisis. It's not your fault, Luis said, reading his thoughts. Thomas has been pushing himself too hard for weeks. Sophia's demands, his own perfectionism, something had to give. Before Andre could respond, the office door opened. Sophia emerged, her face pale but composed, followed by a worried-looking Lisa. The cast members straightened, all eyes turning to their director. "Everyone, gather around," Sophia called. She waited until the entire company had formed a loose circle before continuing. "As you've heard, Thomas will be unable to continue with our production. His health must come first, and we wish him a speedy recovery." Murmurs of concern rippled through the group. Sophia held up a hand for silence. "We have 5 days until we welcome our first audience. 5 days to solve this challenge." Her voice was steady, but Andre could see the tension in her shoulders, the tight grip of her fingers on her notebook. "I've made calls to every pianist in my contacts. Due to the short notice, no one is available. We have 3 options." The theater fell completely silent. "First, we use a recording. Not my preference, but practical." Sophia's mouth tightened, showing what she really thought of that option. "Second, we simplify the musical arrangements to something I can play while still directing." Less than ideal, but possible. She paused, and Andre found himself holding his breath. "Third, a miracle appears, and we find someone who can play Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16 by tomorrow's rehearsal." Sophia attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm open to suggestions. Meanwhile, we'll run Act 2 with Option 2, my simplified playing." As the cast moved to their positions, Andre retreated to the back of the theater, his mind racing. The moment had come, handed to him by fate or chance or whatever forces governed such things. Yet still he hesitated. What if he failed? What if his playing wasn't good enough? What if they laughed at the presumption of a cleaner thinking he could save their production? He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice Sophia approaching until she spoke. "Andre, right? The evening cleaner?" Startled, he looked up into her sharp, assessing eyes. He had not realized she knew his name. "Yes, Ms. Novak. We're going to be here late tonight. Crisis mode. I hope that doesn't interfere with your schedule." "No problem at all," he replied, his accent thickening with nervousness. Sophia nodded, already turning away, her mind clearly on a dozen other concerns. Then she paused. "You're here most evenings during rehearsal, aren't you?" "At the back?" Andre swallowed. "Yes, I start early sometimes." She studied him briefly. "You've watched this process unfold. Tell me, off the record, how bad does it look from the outside?" The question surprised him. Directors, in his experience, rarely ask the opinion of cleaning staff. "The play is beautiful," he said honestly. "The actors are ready. The only problem was the Mozart," she finished for him. "Yes, well, we'll find a solution." She gave him a tired smile. "We always do." As she walked away, Andre felt Luis's eyes on him from across the room. His friend gave him a small, encouraging nod that said clearer than words, "It's time." But Andre turned back to his cleaning cart. Not yet, not tonight. He needed to think. The rehearsal proceeded with Sophia at the piano, playing a stripped-down version of the score that lacked all the nuance and emotion of Mozart's original. The cast did their best to work with it, but everyone could feel the hole at the center of their production, a space where beauty should have been. Later that night, after most of the company had gone home, Andre sat alone in the theater's small break room, a cup of cold tea between his hands. Luis found him there, still in his uniform despite his shift having ended hours ago. "You didn't play for them," Luis said, not a question, but a statement. Andre stared into his cup. "It wasn't the right moment. When will the right moment come? Opening night? After the production closes?" Luis pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "My friend, I respect your privacy and your reasons, but I don't understand your hesitation." Andre was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with memory. 20 years ago, I performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the St. Petersburg Philharmonic. The hall was full. Critics from Moscow had come. It was to be my breakthrough performance. He had never shared this story with anyone in America, not even Luis. Halfway through the first movement, I missed an entrance. Just a small error, but in my mind it grew. I recovered, but I was shaken. I played the rest technically well, but without heart. The reviews called me competent but cold, lacking the fire of a true artist. Luis waited patiently as Andre gathered his thoughts. 6 months later, the economic crisis hit. My savings disappeared overnight. My mother became ill. I had to choose between my career and her care. He looked up at Luis. It wasn't really a choice. I took whatever work I could find. Eventually, I came here where no one knew I had once played in concert halls. And now? Luis asked gently. Now I'm afraid, Andre admitted. Not of playing poorly. I know I can play this Mozart piece. I'm afraid of what comes after. If I step onto that stage, I can't go back to being just the invisible man who cleans the theater. Everything will change. Change can be good, Luis suggested. Change can also be painful. Andre stood up, suddenly restless. What if they applaud my playing but still see me as nothing more than a curiosity? The cleaning man who knows Mozart. What if I reach for my old dream only to have it slip through my fingers again? Luis considered this. Those are fair questions. But let me ask you this. When you play now in the empty theater with only me listening, how does it feel? Andre closed his eyes, remembering the flow of music through his fingers, the sense of reconnection with something he had thought lost forever. Like coming home, he whispered. Then perhaps that's enough, Luis said. Perhaps that's the miracle. Not saving their production, but saving yourself. The words stayed with Andre through the night and into the next morning. He arrived at the theater earlier than usual, drawn by an inner restlessness. The building was quiet, the next rehearsal not scheduled until noon. He moved through his cleaning routine automatically, his mind elsewhere. When he reached the stage, he found himself standing before the piano once more. The instrument seemed to be waiting for him, patient through the years of his absence, ready for his return. Andre sat down and began to play. Not Mozart this time, but Chopin, a nocturne, soft and reflective. He played for himself, for the boy who had fallen in love with music, for the young man who had dreamed of concert halls, for the middle-aged cleaner who had found his way back to the keys. He was so absorbed in the music that he didn't hear the theater door open, didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows of the back row, listening. Only when he finished the piece and the last note faded did he sense he was not alone. He turned, squinting into the dim theater. Sofia Novak stepped into the light of the aisle. Her face held an expression Andre had never seen before, a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope. It was you, she said simply. Andre stood, instinctively moving away from the piano. Ms. Novak, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Play the Mozart, she interrupted. The sonata from Act 2, play it for me now. It wasn't a request but a command. Andre hesitated only briefly before sitting back down. This was the moment, ready or not. He placed his fingers on the keys and began. The music flowed more naturally than ever before, perhaps because he had no time to overthink it, no chance to doubt himself. He played with technical precision but also with heart, letting the joy and melancholy of Mozart's composition speak through him. When he finished, Sofia hadn't moved. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Where did you learn to play like that? She asked. St. Petersburg Conservatory, he answered, his voice steady despite his racing heart. A long time ago. Sofia walked slowly down the aisle toward him. And now you clean our theater. Life takes unexpected turns, Andre said simply. She reached the stage and looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Do you know what you just did? Andre waited, unsure what she meant. You just solved our impossible problem, Sofia said. Then unexpectedly she smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. And you just reminded me why I fell in love with theater in the first place. The magic of it. The surprises. The moments that can't be planned. She extended her hand to him. Will you play for our production, Andre? Will you be our miracle? Andre looked at her outstretched hand, at the piano that had brought him back to himself, at the stage that might become his second chance. All the fears and doubts of the past weeks, the past years, seemed to shrink in importance next to this one simple question. Yes, he said, taking her hand. I will play. Word spread through the Palacio Theater like wildfire. The evening cleaner was their new pianist. The news met with reactions ranging from disbelief to amusement to cautious hope. No one quite knew what to expect when Andre arrived for his first official rehearsal. Dressed not in his usual gray maintenance uniform but in simple black pants and a white button-down shirt, the best he owned. Everyone. "This is Andrei Petrov," Sophia announced to the assembled cast and crew. "He'll be taking over as our pianist for the production." Andrei stood awkwardly at her side, feeling the weight of curious stares. He recognized every face. He had cleaned around these people for years, but they were seeing him for the first time. Andrei trained at the St. Petersburg Conservatory and has extensive classical performance experience, Sophia continued. She didn't mention how long ago that had been, or what he had been doing since. "I've heard him play the Mozart piece, and he's exactly what our production needs." The lead actress, Paula, stepped forward with a warm smile. "Welcome to the other side of the curtain, Andre." Others followed her lead, offering handshakes and words of welcome. Their kindness loosened something tight in Andre's chest. Still, he noticed a few skeptical glances, a few whispered comments behind hands. He couldn't blame them. He was a wild card, an unknown quantity with opening night just days away. "Let's get to work," Sophia said, clapping her hands. "Act 2 from the beginning. Andre, whenever you're ready." Andre took his place at the piano, adjusting the bench that had been set to Thomas's height. The familiar smell of wood and brass surrounded him. He flexed his fingers, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes of Mozart's sonata filled the theater, and Andre was immediately aware of the difference between playing alone in an empty building and performing as part of a living, breathing production. The actors moved according to his tempo. The lighting cues aligned with his phrasing. He was no longer a soloist, but part of an organic whole. He glanced up to find Sophia watching him, her expression intent but unreadable. When he finished the piece, the theater was silent for a long moment. Then Paula laughed, a sound of pure delight. "Well, that solves that problem." The tension broke. Cast members exchanged relieved looks. The stage manager made notes with newfound energy. Only Sophia remained composed, though Andre thought he detected the ghost of a smile on her lips. "Better," she said simply. "Now let's run through the transitions." The next 4 days passed in a blur of rehearsals, adjustments, and frantic preparation. Andre took a leave of absence from his cleaning job, with the theater manager's blessing. "Just promise you'll come back if this acting thing doesn't work out," she had said with a wink. "You're still the best cleaner we've had." By day, Andre played for the production. By night, he practiced alone, refining his interpretation, ensuring his technique would hold up under pressure. Luis often sat in the empty theater during these solo sessions, a supportive presence as Andre worked through his anxieties. "You've come so far in such a short time," Luis observed on the eve of the final dress rehearsal. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Andre considered the question carefully. As a pianist, yes. As a man about to step back into a world he left behind 20 years ago, he shrugged. "That I don't know." The dress rehearsal the next day went remarkably well. The cast had found new energy with Andre's playing. The Mozart sonata, in particular, had transformed from a problem to be solved into a highlight of the production. Even the most skeptical company members now nodded approvingly when Andre played. Only Sophia maintained her demanding standards, calling for adjustments in tempo here, more feeling there. But even her criticisms had lost their sharp edge. She worked with Andre as she would with any other professional, respecting his instincts while pushing for her vision. After the final run-through, she approached the piano as the others filed out, exhausted but satisfied. "Opening night tomorrow," she said, leaning against the glossy black surface. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Andre admitted with a small smile. "But in a good way." Sophia studied him with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see more than most. "You know, when I made that joke about marrying anyone who could play Mozart properly, I never imagined it would lead to this." Andre felt heat rise to his face. "I didn't come forward because of that," he said quickly. "It was just, I know." She waved away his explanation. "Life has strange timing, doesn't it? If Thomas hadn't gotten sick, if you hadn't been practicing all these weeks, if I hadn't come in early that morning." She shook her head. "So many ifs. Do you believe in fate, Ms. Novak?" Andre asked. "Sophia," she corrected. "After all this, I think you can use my first name." She considered his question. Not fate exactly, but I believe talent finds a way to express itself, even when buried. Like water flowing underground, eventually it reaches the surface. Her words stayed with Andre as he walked home that night through quiet streets. Talent finds a way. Had his found its way back after all these years, or had he found his way back to it? Opening night arrived with the usual controlled chaos. Andre spent the afternoon at home, alternating between practicing difficult passages and trying to quiet his racing thoughts. At 5 o'clock, he dressed in the formal black suit Sophia had arranged for him to borrow from the costume department. Looking in his small bathroom mirror, he hardly recognized himself. When he arrived at the theater's back entrance, Luis was waiting. "I brought you something," the security guard said, holding out a small box. Inside was a sleek black tie. "Camilla thought you might need it." Andre was touched by the gesture. "Thank you. For this and for everything else." Luis helped him with the tie, then stepped back to assess the transformation. "Not bad for a cleaner," he said with a grin. "Not bad for a security guard either," Andre replied, nodding at Luis's own dress clothes. He and Camilla had been given complimentary tickets to the show, Sophia's idea. Backstage was a hive of activity. Actors warming up, technicians checking equipment, makeup artists making final touches. Andre made his way to the green room, where he found a small card propped against a cup of tea. It read simply, "Play like you did that morning." The house lights dimmed precisely at 7:30. From his position at the piano, Andre could hear the murmur of the audience settling into their seats. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. 20 years since he had performed for a real audience. 20 years of silence, and now this. The curtain rose. The play began. Andre played his accompaniment flawlessly, supporting the actors, becoming part of the story's fabric. Act 1 passed in what felt like minutes rather than an hour. During intermission, Lisa found him backstage. "They love it," she reported, eyes bright with excitement. "The critics are practically glowing." "And Sophia?" Andre asked. Lisa laughed. "Still finding things to fix. You know how she is." She squeezed his arm. "But between you and me, I haven't seen her this pleased with a production in years." Act 2 began, building toward the crucial scene where Mozart's Sonata No. 16 would feature prominently. As the moment approached, Andre felt a curious calm settle over him. No more fear, no more doubt. Just him and the music that had been his first love. When the time came, his fingers found the keys with absolute certainty. He played not just with technical perfection, but with soul, with all the joy and pain of his journey from concert halls to cleaning floors and back to music again. He played for his younger self, for his mother who had sacrificed so much for his training, for Luis who had kept his secret, and yes, perhaps a little for Sophia, who had unwittingly given him back his voice. The final notes of the sonata hung in the air like a question. Then came the answer, thunderous applause. The rest of the play unfolded beautifully. When the final curtain fell and the cast took their bows, Sophia insisted that Andre join them on stage. Stepping into the spotlight, he blinked against the brightness, overwhelmed by the standing ovation that greeted him. Later, at the opening night party, he stood somewhat apart from the celebration, still processing everything that had happened. Sophia found him there, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To new beginnings," she said, offering him one. "To Mozart," he countered with a smile. They clinked glasses. Around them, cast and crew celebrated, critics mingled with donors. Success hung in the air like perfume. "So," Sophia said after a comfortable silence, "what happens now?" "The show runs for 3 weeks," Andre replied, deliberately misunderstanding. She gave him a look that said she wasn't fooled. "And after that?" "Back to cleaning?" Andre considered the question that had been on his mind since that first rehearsal. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe not just cleaning. The community college needs a piano teacher for their evening classes. Lisa mentioned it might be a good fit." "It would be," Sophia agreed. "You have a gift for bringing music to life. It should be shared." "And you?" Andre asked. "What's next for the great director?" "A vacation, I think. Somewhere quiet. Then a new production in the spring." She turned to face him fully. "I might need a music consultant. Someone who understands nuance." Their eyes met with new understanding. Not the beginning of romance, perhaps, but of something equally valuable, mutual respect and possibility. "About that joke you made," Andre said hesitantly. About marrying anyone who could play Mozart properly. Sophia laughed, the sound genuine.